Hi, this is Deborah with Crouching Bigfoot Hidden Dog Man. If you have had an experience and you'd like to come on the show, please email me at crouchingbigfoot@gmail.com. Our guest tonight is Gordon. Gordon is in Canada and he's had many experiences with Bigfoot and as well as multi-dimensional beings. Gordon has been a logger for many years and that has allowed him to have a lot of very interesting experiences. Gordon, welcome to the show. You can just kind of start wherever you'd like, and there you
Yeah,
go.
I'm just thinking of
Okay,
what start
okay, great.
is. Should I go local or afar?
It's up to you. Whatever, wherever you'd like to start. You can start with one of your logging events that you first had when you were logging, and or one of your first Bigfoot events or experiences. That would be fine.
Yeah, I think we should stick with the Bigfoot stuff here because I get into logging and we'll burn up 4 hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you can take all the time you need. All right.
Uh,
So,
well, let's fly to Crater Mountain because a lot of stuff started there to begin with.
okay.
Uh, and it's actually where I had my first, what I didn't know it at the time, but I found out afterwards it was a Sasquatch experience.
Okay.
Um, for those not familiar with the area here in British Columbia, Crater Mountain is located in the Okanagan region. It is quite close to the U.S. border. It's an extinct volcano, and it's got a lot of activity up there, a lot of activity. And the very first time, was my two sons and we decided that we needed to go camp up on that mountain. We'd been in the valley below for a few years already, enjoying various locations down there. And this time we thought we should get adventurous and get right up the mountain. It's an old logging track that goes up there and it kind of winds its way back and forth, switchbacking up the mountain until it starts to level off a bit. And then you go past, it's a really neat old homestead with a log house on it. It's dated on the doorpost. The door is no longer there, but the post for it is, and it's got a date on it carved into it from the early 1950s. So I don't know
Ah,
if it was built or how that all came about, but it's abandoned now. And we went a fair distance past that. We found a nice campsite. It was by a little creek and relatively level for being up on the mountain. And that's where we decided to set up. First day we were there, the two boys decided to go back towards the cabin, wander around there, whereas I wanted to look further up the hill and explore different angles from for hiking from there. And so we split up that day and met back at the campsite up and had our dinner and watched the stars as it was starting to get dark. We had a really nice, beautiful view to what would be the northwest off the mountainside there, across the valley and up into the stars. And yeah, we were treated. We saw two moving stars going across parallel to each other. Even they kept even with each other. Fancy for
wow.
and yeah, they went across quite a bit of sky and then they just parked. They kind of parked where they had a background of other stars that were not moving around. And as we watched, they just kind of went poof and they were gone. It was
Oh,
it was
my.
maybe a 10, 15 minutes after that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and at this point, we're all just kind of vegging out. Right? We had done a lot of exploring already, and we're, busy day, tired, beautiful
Right.
night. And this little tiny pinprick of light showed up in the sky, almost directly out from where we are. You go up into the sky and kind of direct out from the mountainside. And this little pinprick of light showed up. And as I focused on it, it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it became this big, huge eyeball in the sky. It looked just like an eyeball, like somebody plucked out of their head. And there it was floating in the sky looking back at us.
Oh my goodness.
Well, then it just went, poof, it was gone.
Wow.
And I decided not to say anything because it just seemed too out there. And I
Yeah.
was just quietly thinking about it. And my youngest son popped up with a question about it and asked if any of us else had seen that. And I went, okay. So I asked him to describe what he saw. He described exactly the same thing. The odd thing about that was, though, the next morning he had no memory about it at all, at all.
Wow.
And it was very clear in my mind. So it was not long after that we all decided it was time to hit the sack. The two boys had arranged their sleeping bags around the fire pit, and they chose to sleep under the stars because of the high population of coyotes up there. And um, my little dog, their cattle dog, Kiana, would be at risk, I feared. So we slept in the tent, which is all right. We were nice and comfortable in there, and she liked it. And we all went to sleep pretty quick. And I don't know how long it would have been, maybe 2, 3 hours later. We're all woken, and this voice was absolutely huge. Like this being, I don't know, it had a chest capacity just huge. It was very deep, very loud, very penetrating voice, but it was not speaking a language any of us could understand. And it went on for I don't know how long. Its toes, it came right up to the tent. Like its toes had to be no more than about 6, 7 inches from where my head had been on the pillow.
Mm-hmm.
And and then when it stopped, it was just like this big chorus of coyotes that would respond. It was like a semicircle around us of all these coyotes, and they stopped, and it repeated. And this went on 6 times. This creature went on 6 times. I
Wow.
never, I never once at the time thought Bigfoot or anything like that. I just didn't know what it was. I've never experienced anything in all my time in the woods like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a few weeks later after we got home, and I'd been on Facebook, and there's a website or a page, I guess it would be on Facebook, where these people are contacted by Bigfoot. They're kind of like pressed into service, if you will. Um, and their job with these Bigfoot that they connect with is to receive messages from the star beings to the Bigfoot for humanity, and they're to relay it through, and that's why they're on Facebook, because that's their venue. This particular man, I learned of his history later on, and he was in the neighborhood of Kennedy Lake on the east, off the east end of Kennedy Lake, which is on Vancouver Island, very close to Long Beach. For anybody who may know where that is, it's a popular tourist spot for the province. And he actually got quite frightened because this Bigfoot was being very persistent in connecting with him. But it was nothing he had to be afraid of. It simply wanted to connect with him to be his contact to relay these messages through. And he happened to be in that same region up by he was down in the valley below, close to town, and he was sleeping with a friend in a converted bus. It was for a camper, and he said it came and banged on the roof. He'd already had a relationship with this Sasquatch already, and he just basically listened to what he had to say, and he never thought much of it until I posted on Facebook a bit about this, and so we got to talking a little bit, and yeah, he said too, there was a different native guy, and the one that told me that I could have asked it to speak English, but he was very familiar with this Sasquatch. And so I got a better perspective of it, and I got a better idea of why he was there and why he was interested in talking to us. The eye in the sky, I think, played a part in this all the way along. Uh, it's hard to qualify that any way, shape, or form, but it's just in my gut. I feel like that the two events were very closely related. Um, and it was no big thing in the end of it all, but it stuck in my mind. I can still hear that voice when I close my eyes sometimes.
Wow.
Uh, there was nothing fearful about it. It was if it had wanted to do us harm, it could have walked in there and it could have ruined us all in a matter of minutes.
Right.
Um, and it didn't. Right? It wanted to communicate with us, and unfortunately, I didn't understand the whole process at the time. I do have to go back up that mountain because I don't know if I'll ever get a connection with them, but maybe if I'm up there just myself and Kiana, of course, and then maybe we'll get a relationship going again. I've been back to the mountain several times. Usually when I've gone, it's been when the snow's heavy and you can't get up there very far before you're blocked out anyway.
Mhm.
I've got another story going back to that mountain. I was requested by a close spiritual friend, and I don't know if you want me to go into that one at this time or not.
Sure, you can do whatever you like.
All
Whatever's
right, all
whatever
right.
you want to share with us.
This is going to pull us into the ET factor a little bit more in
Okay.
depth there.
Some people do believe they are related, Bigfoot with UFOs and things like that. So we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
I've no doubt on that account. They are definitely related. Um, so this time it was late March, early April in that area, and a friend of mine, he called me up, right, and he says, Gord, you got to go out there. He says you got to find yourself a divine feminine person, energy is the word he used, and you need to go up to that mountain you told me about, to where the portal is, and you need to be there to witness what's going to happen. And the first thought was, well, where the heck am I going to find a divine female who's going to go with a crusty old logger up a mountain, little the tail end of winter, and uh,
Hmm.
and of course, it's not like you're going to just find somebody like that just going to step up to the role. And it turns out Kiana happens to be female, and she happens to be very divine, and I call her my spirit dog, and she's very much like that. So the two of us, off we went. We went up the mountain, and I tried several times to get past the old track right at where it leaves the main road. I went
Hmm.
up, and right in the middle of the road was a big rock that my four-wheel drive wouldn't clear. So I nearly bust my back on that one because it was a big one, and I rolled it out of the way. And as soon as I bent over to pick it up, the first thought that flashed into my mind as I was lifting it wasn't, "Oh my God, my back's gone." It was a Bigfoot sound, right? It was like saying, "Hey, Bigfoot put it here." And
Oh.
first, I'm thinking, "Oh, why would a Bigfoot want to do that when I'm supposed to be here?" But after several more rocks, as I progressed up, it became more and more clear. And then it came to a rock that was way too big to move. And so I had to back out. This is a very narrow road. Like it's barely 6 inches wider on either side of the tires, and a very
Hmm.
steep if you misjudge. And so I backed out of there because I had to back up quite a ways before I could find a spot where I could get turned around. I went back down. There happened to be a really nice camping spot by the river at the base of the mountain. So that's where I set up. And after I got all established, set up, I had a good chunk of day ahead of me. And so I decided to go hike up. And there was a ridge on this face close to where I was camped that I'd always been tempted to climb. So I thought this is a perfect day to go climb that. Right? It was sunny out. It was not really warm, but it wasn't really cold either. So Kiana and I set off, and we started going up. It's pretty steep, but it's an easy hike. Go up, I don't know, several hundred feet of elevation, and then you end up at a nice meadow up there. And we worked our way up. We took our time. We had little breaks going up. The one thing that kind of caught me out was several times going up, I could hear coyotes all around. I could hear them all around, like close. And I kept looking at Kiana to see what her response was, because once you're up there, you can't get, there's no, if they decide to come and harass, you can't go back, you can't go forward, you can't go sideways because they're all around. And as it sounded with this, they were. And I looked at her, she didn't hear any of it. And I thought, well, that's awfully strange.
It is.
And this,
Dogs usually hear stuff like that.
well,
Like
absolutely,
sometimes
yeah.
even before we do.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, um, she would normally, in that kind of a situation, she would come and challenge me. She would look me right in the eyes and say, "Is this wise?" Like in her own little telepathic way.
Hmm.
And none of that. She was just, anytime I paused for a little rest break, I'd hear them, and then I'd watch her, and she was just sniffing around, not even the least bit concerned at all. So I thought, well, it if they're around, it's not bad. So we kept going up, and we heard it 4 or 5 more times as we're going up. And I finally got up to the crest and over, and it was all covered with snow. And the first thing I did was start going through the snow and looking for tracks, and there were none. There's a few tracks from rabbits, but that was it. No coyote tracks anywhere. So I found that all quite strange, and I didn't put two and two together until later on that one. But like, and actually, it was from the Sasquatch Ontario website. I learned that the Sasquatch can imitate coyote sound quite easily, and they do it.
Yeah,
So
and owls, they're really good at imitating owls.
yeah, so I guess in a roundabout way, you could call that a further extension of the Sasquatch experiences with that particular mountain. Uh, it was a good hike. We ended up rounding our way back, and we went down the old track to get back down. And I could see right away, like that big rock. It was wise that it was there to stop me, because if I kept on going, I would have been in a bit of a jackpot trying to get up and getting into areas where you couldn't go forward and you'd have a hard time backing up. So I'm glad that that rock was there and made me camp at the base.
Yeah.
But the real story is about to come. So we got back and we got set up and got the camp all organized, tent, all this kind of stuff. Nice collection of dry firewood I found nearby, old alder trees that are laying around. They make perfect firewood for that time of year. And got comfortable and set up the chairs and just laid back for whatever was to come. And I had a really good view up. Like, I'm familiar enough with the mountain. I know where that portal is up there. And I sent you pictures of it with that big rock, so you got a good idea what it
Oh,
looks like.
yeah, I saw that. That was really good.
And so I'm sitting there just waiting for whatever's going to happen to happen.
Hmm.
And it was all visual. It was, I don't even know what time it was. It was later into the night. I didn't use a clock or anything, because it was, once it's dark, and it's light. So it was late in the night. The stars were out. Beautiful night. Chilly, pre-spring night up in the mountains. And I'm looking up towards that portal, and what started to happen was these big blue orbs started flying, and they flew in about 4 abreast of each other and at a time. And I don't know how many of those runs were coming in, but these big orbs, and I would be visually a straight line up to where I'm seeing them. They had to be about 7 or 8 miles away, and I'm looking at these things, and they just kept coming. I couldn't even keep count. They would come in, and as the next 3 or 4 rounds came in, you could see the previous ones exiting out. So there would be my left, which would be taking them east, and they were coming in pretty much direct from the west. And I couldn't keep count of them, but there had to be hundreds of them that came in there and left. And it's an old volcano. It's a very, very old extinct volcano. I don't even know when it last erupted. The first
You
time
said,
I had, pardon me.
I was going to say, you said there were caves all up in there too,
This is a different mountain than that one that with the caves.
that you sent me the pictures of. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I sent pictures of up on the mountain, but I didn't have any that would give you a good distance shot of it to send.
Okay.
Um, but being a volcano, it's gonna have openings in it, and there's probably are caves that go in. If you go right over the top, if I went straight up over the mountain and down the other side, and I've been up on that side too, there's a few small little lakes up in there that are good for trout, and there's a very, very serious cliff faces there that go up to the mountain from that side. It's not a good mountain. There is what you would class as a pedestrian access to the upper reaches of the mountain for people who just want to either take a quad or a dirt bike or walk it up. There's supposed to be a parking lot there. I've never gone that way because I prefer the other way, where call me odd, but I like the more difficult hike than the way. but in that neighborhood of where those cliffs are, it's an area I should go explore because it's more likely there I'll find something like a cave than from the other side where we
Yeah.
went up. And I should make note of this area because it's the way it slopes and the grasses that grow there, the natural hay that grows there. It's used by a lot of ranchers for free range cattle, and so it's fenced off in sections, and it gives it kind of takes away a little bit from it, but it's still there's it's a magnificent mountain, and it's well worth going to explore and um, check out. The one thing about that mountain that has occurred to me, because I recently came across the Iseti Ranch uh, Facebook, not Facebook, YouTubes, and I started getting interested in that. And they have a lot of ET experiences there from Mount Adams, which is a bit west of them. And that can't be, the way I understand it, I haven't looked it up on a map yet, but it's got to be pretty close to the border with Canada, which would put it pretty close to this particular mountain that I was at. And when I was watching, they had a lot of footage of UFOs flying to and from that mountain, Mount Adams, and across it. And I'm looking at them and I thought, well, they don't look a whole lot different than the ones I saw going in and out of that mountain up that valley, Crater Mountain. Um, so I'm leaping to draw conclusions there. So I can't say that that's how it actually worked out, but it's pretty close for a
Yeah.
UFO. Just a matter of seconds to cover the distance. So
Isn't that the same mountain that Mount Adams, isn't that the same one they said, or like videos have shown that they have like some kind of opening for crafts to go into? Is that the same one?
yes, it is. It's actually
Okay.
quite a cave opening that they can just fly in and out of. It's like their
Okay.
own
I
little.
thought I thought it might be. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, the military likes to go harass them in there too. I understand. So
Oh boy.
yeah, well, they just kind of get the footage I seen. They just end up kind of looking silly, but because these
Hmm.
aircraft way outmaneuver their helicopters and whatever else they throw in there.
Yeah.
But that's just how it is
Yeah.
with the world of UFOs. Why we don't have any disclosure on it yet. I don't
Maybe
know what.
one day.
One day, I think we got disclosure already. It's just the naysayers that hang back that don't really want to comment one way or the other. And if you open up on UFOs in the wrong crowd, you'll get labeled kind of like a nutcase or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I don't really. I Unless I'm talking to somebody, I get a good feel that they're
Hmm.
awake and understand things. I don't really engage.
I do
So
seem to think that more people are waking up and becoming aware of a lot of things that, were kind of taboo here, in the last 10, 20 years.
yeah, there was one photo I sent you that I took from my home
Hmm.
uh, in the night, and there's a light up in the sky, and it's kind of L-shaped, except it's laying back on the upper side of the L. Did you have a look at that one?
Yeah, I see that.
I can't say that's a UFO or anything else, but it's definitely not a star.
It's a very, yeah, it's an unusual shape to be up in the sky like that, definitely.
Yeah, and I caught that looking to the south from my yard. And I sent you some photos of some of the mountains that way, um, and they're all visible from my yard. I can go out into the
Yeah.
front yard on the porch and see these mountains quite
Oh, that
clearly.
it's really stunning, all the pictures you sent. Just stunning.
I saved you the bulk of them because there's a lot more. Um,
Over 1,000, you said, right?
yeah, I think about 1,300 thereabouts.
Yeah. So that white looking rock and then the picture that is down below of the drawing, what is that?
Okay, that's a stone. It's white quartz. It's about the size of my fist, and it goes with that photo of where it's foggy and there's that maple tree and it's up in a little gulch. They're going up the mountainside.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little creek that runs down in there. It's about 10 inches, maybe a foot wide, depending on the flow of water. And
Okay.
uh, and it was there when that was off an old abandoned logging road. It
Hmm.
had reopened since and then reclosed. Uh, well, nature's closing it because it just makes little landslides through there. It doesn't want people in there with vehicles. Uh, that area, the boys and I have gone there hiking a few times because it was closed off. It made a nice little area, and that time would have been about the same time of the year, not the same year though that I went to that old volcano. It was where I really started getting woken up because it was gated off, and we just parked at the gate and walked in the first time we went up, and it was out of boredom. It was, I think, June, and it had been kind of a kind of a damp June for this area. Usually it starts to shape up pretty good with nice sunny areas, but we've gone through a bit of a spell of a lot of drizzly kind of rain, and the boys and I just decided we're bored. We needed to get up in the mountain and do something just different. So we drove up, parked at the gate, and walked in. Now, as soon as I got myself out of the truck and I was getting my backpack all organized, and Kiana was waiting for me, and the boys went ahead. They went through past the barrier, and I heard this voice said, very loud. It's like you're talking to me, and it said, "We're taking it back." Just that. And I looked around, didn't see anybody around. I'm wondering where the heck that voice came from. I looked at my sons, and they didn't hear anything. It was clear just by their behavior. They were just kind of sauntering around, waiting for me to catch up, which I did quickly. I caught up with them, and we started heading down. We went
Hmm.
down 4 or 5 kilometers down, and the road kind of just winds along this side of this mountain. And this particular mountain is hollow. That's the one I was telling you about. So we're close to the base of that mountain, following the Tamahai Creek up the valley, and we arrived at where that tree is, and and I looked at it and I thought, well, that's really unique, right? And I'm looking at it, how it's kind of blended in with that little bit of fog and everything that was around it. It had a neat look to it, and that's why I took that picture. And while I'm doing all that, the voice said it again. It said, "We're taking it back." And I just went, whoa, twice. And this time it was close. And I looked at my boy again, and they clearly didn't hear it. I looked at Kiana, she didn't hear it. And it was just after that second time hearing that voice saying that, I started walking around, and it was sort of like I was being led, if you will. And the grass was starting to get a little taller alongside the track there, and that white stone with the markings on it, was in that grass. And I looked down, and I looked at it, and the marking side, which to me looked very much like what you would envision a Sasquatch to look like, if you're
Yeah, it
just
has a little face on the front, it looks like, doesn't it?
yeah, and it does. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, this is kind of profound. And in a lot of cases, like Native people,
Hmm.
I don't know if they would have taken it as an omen and brought it home as I did or not. And I've struggled with that back and forth a few times. I saw it as being gifted to me because I didn't walk there by my own accord. It was like sort of like I was being steered with, and I know that a lot of people are going to listen to that and say, well, that makes no sense whatsoever. And all I can say is it goes to experience, and just leaving yourself open to how things can happen, but which I tend to do. And I know we've had this discussion a few times. I choose every time I go into these wilderness areas to never go in with fear in my heart. I go in with just open curiosity and respect for all that is nature around me, and I don't have bad experiences accordingly. I've been asked a few times by different friends over the course of time when I mention these kinds of ventures. They say, "Well, what gun do you carry?" And I've never ever carried a gun. I don't see
Hmm.
any to carrying a gun. And in fact, if you carry a gun, it's going to diminish your experiences because every being out there can smell the gunpowder, right? And
Yeah.
so it's
And
going to limit your experience by a good margin. I've even been like with Kiana, and at the time our golden retriever Mika was staying alive, still
mhm.
alive. Part. Um, we've gone up, and I knew for a fact we were being tracked by a cougar. I could tell she's very clever that way, and she'll let me know, and she trusts me. And The number one rule, I see it when you know you're in that situation. The number one rule is if you behave like food, you'll become food. If you don't behave like food, then you're just going to be observed. And so I always keep an eye on my back trail. I use a walking stick cut just a little bit above my shoulder, and like a lion tamer, you can use that to keep a cat at bay. But I've never ever had to. I've never had an issue, things like that, even though when I know for a fact we're being trailed by a cougar. So anyway, all that nonsense aside, it's when I'm up there, so I don't feel the same level of fears or anything like that with this rock. Um, Even just talking about it, and it's only like where I'm sitting, it's about 5-6 feet to my right where it's sitting, where I
Hmm.
keep it. And this rock, I brought it home, and I can tell you, it's a very energized piece of work. That whatever is in there, it's very energized. Um, and When I first got it home and kept it, um, you could almost say at times it was making me go almost batshit crazy because I found out I'm a highly empathic person through all this, and this has helped with friends I had with Skype, and we're going back 6 or so years. Um, Friends on Skype who knew me, uh, they commented to that same effect, right? That I'm empathic, right? Which means that you're very
Hmm.
sensitive to energies and all kinds of things. And uh, and they said you got to smudge that stone, right? Because it was really like at the time there was a lot of kerfuffle going on in Israel with the Palestinians, and I knew that a lot of people were dying in Palestine at that time, and I could literally feel every one of those souls leaving their bodies, and that's what was making me crazy.
Oh
Uh,
man.
and uh, and I was asked, "Did you smudge that stone?" And I had. So I learned how to do it. I smudged that stone, and it's behaved ever since. But I keep it as a watchdog. Um, and I've also learned that I can see through dimensions. At times, I can go into different dimensions and see things. I'm sensitive to that, and I don't know how to explain that one at all. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's I've had too many experiences to. The more experiences you have, the more I accommodate them, the more you learn, and the more you grow with it, and I just come to accept it.
Yeah.
Uh, I've seen more demonic beings and that they live in the alternate dimensions to where we are. In fact, they can walk right beside you. If you're not sensitive, you'll never know. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's opened up a whole new perspective to my life, and I got to tell you, it's incredibly interesting, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Absolutely.
Um, Up the back end, the top end of that valley, there are two peaks. One's on the American side of the border,
Uh-huh.
and, and the other's on the Canadian side of the border. And it was in that same period of time because of the experience up on Crater Mountain with that Bigfoot. I started exploring out topics, and I found the local website for the. There's a lot of Bigfoot in this area all around. Across the Fraser River up into the Harrison Lake area around here. They're everywhere, and
Yeah.
they're multidimensional. So if they don't want you to see them, you're not going to see them. If they want you to see them, you'll see them. It's as simple as that. And Yeah, some of the situations I think earlier on in people settling this area and exploring it and enjoying it. One of the stories was a fellow up the river, the Chilliwack River, which runs past these mountains that I'm talking about in this region. Uh, this fellow had been fishing, and he had put a string of trout up on to hang while he was getting the fire going and getting just doing camping kind of stuff. And he turned around and he saw a Sasquatch that was stealing his fish. And he chased it across the road, and it ran across the road down towards the river and disappeared with his fish.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, that's one story. And straight across the river, like the river comes down and bends and it heads towards the Fraser, close to where my house is.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, Across that river is a small 2-lane road, kind of a country road, and it's very a lot of cliff like areas, like not really high, but not that not something your average person could just scoot up. And he saw one there too, and that's in the website. But the one that's most profound is up in those two peaks. So on the American side of those two peaks, this fellow, and we're going to the mid 1980s, I think 1986, and this fellow decided he was going to go up for the weekend with his wife and his 6-year-old daughter. And on the American side, you go up their peak. They've made a campsite up there with a picnic table and all that. Apparently, I don't know if it's still there, but at the time it was quite nice. And he didn't come back when he was supposed to. He said he's going to be 2 days. So they sent a search party up to see what became of this fellow. And he worked as a border guard on the American side. So I'm presuming he took a gun with him because it's the only way I can make sense of it. And what they found when they got to the campsite was pretty horrific because both adults were beaten to death in a manner, and this is the wording that was used. Never once, this article was in the Sasquatch research site here local, and the wording that they used was beaten to death in a manner that could only be done if something picked them up by their ankles and swung them like a bat against the rocks and trees.
Oh, my goodness.
And the little girl, she was sitting at the table completely unharmed. She would be probably in her 40s now. Um, so
Wow.
I haven't heard anything from her. If anybody's approached her to get her perspective on that, I kind of doubt anybody would do that. But she may have approached somebody who had experience with that field that, she may have wanted questions answered for her own sake. Who knows? 6 years old is a pretty impressionable age.
It is. Yeah, I would agree.
Um, and that's the only case I've come across. There was, you go back to when the area was first settled, um, up in the a region, there's a plateau here just outside of town that gets into the mountains a bit. And there was a farm that was set up there. And this woman, her husband would be away working. And she was pestered by Sasquatch coming in and raiding her garden and fruit trees and stuff like that. And she was quite fearful of it. And that was in one of these Sasquatch research sites, that story. Other than that, it's been pretty quiet, pretty calm with them. Here, there's not a lot of issues
Wasn't
with.
there another story that you had mentioned to me about some people that were camping and they were watching them across the river all night? Is that the same one? I mean, is that a different one?
Yeah, that might be a different one. I'm trying to remember that. Me telling you that as you
You were
worded
saying
it.
it didn't hurt, it didn't harm them. It just looked out. They just watched them all night. And they're
Oh, that's like up in the mountain with the boys. I think that part.
oh, okay.
I think that's what that is too, because I don't remember anything like that
Oh, well, you
otherwise.
can. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, tell that one if you're.
I did earlier on in the it's up that was the Crater Mountain up the
Oh,
volcano there.
right. But
The
okay.
volcano, and then there's the eye and sky that preceded the visit.
Oh, okay. Right. I was no. Well, it still seems like there's a different one than that. Maybe you
Well,
can next
my
time you
brain
can
is
tell
old,
that one. But
um, and there's a lot of crap floating around up in that cranium there. So um, it might resurface if that's the case. So
okay.
um, all right. The mountain that's here local, I've been up that one a few different locations, and it's definitely a spirit mountain. It's I sent you the picture there, and you can see where
Yeah.
that V is there. And I mentioned the little lake that's up there. That
Mhm.
was used. uh, historically the natives as a spiritual area over time. I've gone right up. There's no logging road that goes up there. It's pretty beat up, and it's if you don't want your truck scratched, don't go up there because it's crowded with little alder trees trying to take over the road, and so your truck will take a bit of wear and tear to get up there, but it's so worth it to be up there. And I've gone up there a couple of times hiking. In the course of all this, I've learned a lot of native ways. I use native forms of prayer to make sure that with the spirits, I'm on board and they're okay with me coming into these areas. And the first time I went up there, and I'd heard about this lake, and I figured if the natives were going up there, there had to be a trail present on that mountain that would take me to that lake. So that was the quest that I went up there with. And when I got right up there, and it's like a big roundabout, and you're right below all these really, really steep, high cliff faces. You're pretty much straight up, and there's big, huge rocks that have broken off the cliff faces over time at the base
Mm-hmm.
of them. And so I'd gone up there with the intentions of finding a trail. And when I got there, I prayed to the Creator. I asked, for guidance and for acceptance for me to be in that area. I didn't want to be an intruder to the area without some form of permission. And there was no blocking, no warnings or anything. So I went in, and we're very close to the peak of the mountain where I'm at, just at the base of these cliffs. And like I mentioned, there's lots of big rocks that have broken off over time, over centuries. And I'm working my way through, and what I find myself is there's a big field of these broken rocks and trees have sprung up in between them all. And I'm kind of working my way through there, and there's this deep fog that keeps moving around. It's like your London fog, if you ever seen movies where they show that fog, how it kind of just mists around and moves around. And so there's a lot of times where the fog gets so thick, I just stop because if I keep walking, I won't be able to see where the rock ends. And you can drop
Right.
10 feet, right? And I'll probably break a leg if I do that. So I'm really taking my time. And I'm trying to be conscious also of direction. And amongst all this fog and trees and stuff, and I'm starting to realize I'm not really being all that good with my direction as also
Mm-hmm.
right now realizing it. So, but I'm trying to persist. I'm being very careful, taking my time, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working around, and lo and behold, I was led. Like the fog keeps moving, right? So I'm going to where it's more clear when it clears, and I'm
Yeah.
following the clear out. I just got led in a big circle. I ended up back where I parked my truck.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking, okay, I get it. I'm not to find this place today, but I'm to experience it. I've
Mm-hmm.
gone back later with some native friends, a couple. He's an ancestor locally here. Very, very unique, very wise man, but in his 80s. So we went up. I set it up so they were really comfortable to camp. And I slept under the stars that night. And this is right at the same place I parked with the previous account.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're right at as far as you can take a vehicle to the top of that mountain on that side. And and I get them all set up. It's dark. We let the fire go out, and they went into the tent to sleep, and I got myself into my sleeping bag. I'm sleeping right under the stars, and I got a show like you wouldn't believe. Like the
Wow.
sky full of activity. It was almost like watching like the sky became a movie screen, and I was being presented with this very unique movie
Mm-hmm.
and and I could see the flashes of light flying from the different stars or planets, as if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and and I could see little flashes of light here, and it was almost like there's little battles going on up there in the sky, way, way, way up in outer space, and that's what I went to sleep with, watching that. Woke up the next morning. I got up a little ahead of the other two. So I went over into the base right under the cliffs there, and I saw a trail, a very distinct trail. Like, and there's mountain grass growing there, and it's growing, about a foot and a half tall, 2 feet maybe, and and I could see it, a very distinct trail cutting through this grass. right? And there's these big rocks around. I went a different direction than the previous week I went, uh, more just right under the cliff faces there. And and I went to get my friend. I saw they were. I looked back and I could see that they were awake and moving around. So I went and got her, and I took her there to see him, and it was gone. The trail that
Wow.
was clear, my face looking at me back from a mirror, it was gone. And I thought, okay, it showed it to
Wow.
me, but I wanted her to see it, right? So uh, it's that's the nature of that mountain.
Yeah.
I did it with a friend. He had been there before, so we went up on a new approach, which took us up this peak, a secondary peak that kind of springs out, and it's all broken rocks. So the rocks are all, they're about basketball size, a little bigger, a little smaller, and it's loose. So you got to go up really careful. And we get up to the peak and we look down. Like he got up there ahead of me, and he's looking. He says, "I think we went the wrong way because I can't see the lake." I got up there and stood behind him. We're amongst a bunch of small Douglas fir trees. They're quite thick, right? So it was a little hard to see. But when we kind of wiggled around and looked, it was right there down below us. So we went down, and it was a pretty interesting experience. He left this part you'll like. He left his trail cam. He brought his trail cam along with him, which he went back later after the snow had diminished enough to get back the following year and collected it. And he showed me, and he had two pictures that it took, and it was each were over the shoulder of the Sasquatch.
Wow. That's pretty
And
awesome.
yeah, I was right at the edge of that little lake. Um, I got visited with a beautiful monarch butterfly there, and I mean it was really warm that day. So when we got down by the lake, I had my shirt off, and went to my backpack to get I forget what, but didn't matter. And I'm bent over, and it had been on the backpack. So when I tried not to disturb it, but I did because it was impossible not to. And it off, and it just started flying around me, and it landed on my shoulder. And
Wow.
when I started moving around, it just stayed right with me. So I'm walking around the outside perimeter of this lake and just kind of checking things. And I found a beautiful eagle's feather in mint shape on that, which I added to my backpack. And it followed me all the way to just past where that eagle feather was laying on the ground, and then it decided to go back and join the rest of its buddies there on the mountain.
Hmm.
I know that's not much of experience, but it's
Oh,
in,
it sounds
in
really cool though.
yeah, well, in the native world, everything has purpose
Yeah,
in
I
the
agree.
situation,
I
and yeah, it's anybody who's listening and they're not sure about these kinds of things, I can assure you, there's a lot of different religions on this planet, but the native peoples of this continent, I think they really got their act together on spirituality and how it works and how to live, which not against in opposition, but with nature, and that's where we need to get back. And I won't get on my altar and start preaching you nuts, but we we're at a precipice now where we kind of need to start looking at these kinds of things a little more closely and start thinking
hmm
about how we're using this planet and how much we want to be on this planet. Do we want to have to go chasing around and finding another planet to live on? If we take this one down the road it's on now any further, have to.
Yeah, we won't have anywhere to live, will we?
Well, no, it's well, there's a lot of predictive movies
Can't
that
ruin this one.
no, we can't. Anybody who's interested, Hollywood likes to, and Hollywood, if nobody understands this part, Hollywood is two words. It's Hollywood, right?
Hmm.
And if you go to a coven of witches, right, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The wood that they use for the magic wand comes from the holly tree.
Ah,
So that's where the name Hollywood comes from.
right.
So
Wow.
when you So when you look into the movies that they put out, I mean, these people are occultic, and that's not always necessarily a bad thing either. It can go wrong, and probably does in a lot of cases. But they put out predictive movies because in that world, a lot of people call them the cabal. They have an obligation. So they have their evil side and their good side, and they have an obligation to inform the general public of what's going on. And that's what movies do. They inform us of what's going on. So you watch a lot of movies and you will see things, and eventually, if you remember that movie a couple of years, 4 years, 10 years, you'll see that manifest into current things that are happening.
Right.
And the movie that I'm trying to think of here is can't remember exactly the name. It'll come to me, but it takes place in the future where it's illegal to own water.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Everything's desert. Tank Girl, that's what it's called.
Oh, I have heard of that. Okay.
And the opening scene is this little house, and it's on a sand dune because there's no soil anymore. There's no water running anymore. There's nothing. It's just all desert, sandy desert. And the house is on the sand dune, and they're being raided, in which they go in there and arrest them for illegal possession of water.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's the only substance on this planet other than air that we can't live without.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
It's very true.
So, that's what it was, a comedy kind of a movie, but it basically told the whole story. And they eventually they even had interbreeding, right? Ice-T was in there, and he played part human, part I think kangaroo or something was his. So they had animals interbred with humans running around.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty wild.
so it was pretty wild. And the bad guy, he had an electric gun, so he could zap you with it, and it would pull all the water out of your body to dehydrate until you died.
Right.
And then he would drink the water that came out.
Ah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we've got pretty close to an hour. I guess we could wrap it up now and save some for our next interview.
Yeah.
You have anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
I can't think of anything offhand that I haven't covered already.
Okay.
There is
Great.
definitely, or it's the other thing that is close to. That's why I brought up the two peaks, Twin Peaks there,
Right.
because that's really close to where I had it wasn't a visual Sasquatch experience, but I sent you two photos that of displays that the Sasquatch arranged for me.
Okay. Okay. Yep. I think I got those.
Yeah, there's the one that's got all the straw all laid around.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big poo. It was way too big of a poo for a bear. Way too big.
Yeah. Oh boy.
And all that straw was kind of like, that was manipulated. That didn't happen by nature. That straw that was.
Okay.
The other one which was really close to that spot, and that was on the old logging road. It was a logging road that was being grown over that I hiked up, and it switched back and forth up the mountain. It's actually a nice place to go hike. And so on the way back, I went there, saw that, took the picture, and I decided I wanted to shortcut because it switchbacks back and forth. I figured that if I cut through, I could save hiking distance by cutting through and going down through the forest.
Yeah.
It was about a 30-year-old second growth forest, so the branches were pretty much right to the ground on entrance. Inside, they were trimmed up, right? The branches were being shed. As the tree reaches for sunlight, it sheds the lower branches. And it was there where I saw the second one that I sent you, right? Where you've got these branches that were broken off, and they came off of plants that were right up on the road bed, right? And they're very rubbery kind of plants because you bend them to get around them, right? And they'll almost whip you when you let go of them.
Yeah, they look like they've kind of been all pulled off and laid there in a little stack, basically.
Yeah. So how the Sasquatch knew that I was going to walk through the forest at that particular point, and they're laid across. You notice that that board that they're laid across, that board didn't come
Mm-hmm.
from in that forest. It was a man-made board, and it was
Right.
laying across them. And I looked at that and I went, okay, there's something definitely different about this. This is not at all natural to this location.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that picture and I'm pretty certain that Sasquatch was leaving signs for me to find.
Oh yeah, probably was. It's
Now,
pretty interesting. What is
you know,
the one that has the rock that has like the red looking little patterns on it? What is that one?
those are natural rocks that occur there. And when I hike up that road, I'm going through like it's actually not a bad trail because the second growth allows quite a bit of room to move around, and it's all right
Mm-hmm.
on the road bed. So I went up, and you switch back, and I'm coming back above and over where I
Yeah.
entered,
Yeah.
and there's a big rock. There's a lot of loose rock there that has come down and covered up off the road, and it was tree there that was
Oh.
going. It's
Mm-hmm.
all they were tiny because of all the dew that was laying on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, and I just took pictures because they look really pretty.
They do. They have a very interesting pattern on them,
Yeah.
for sure.
Um, I could have loaded up a backpack and packed them out of there, but I just thought, man, they occurred here and this is where they belong. So,
Mm-hmm. They're really pretty.
yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything in a nutshell for the time being.
I love the picture with Kiana out on the rocks. That's a really great picture.
She is, I call her my spirit dog,
Yeah.
and she's got that air about her. Like she's very alert to anything,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's supernatural or not. Right? The Sasquatch, they can adjust, and I'm not sure how you would explain this, but they can adjust their their communication so you can be in a crowd and only one person will hear it,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
that makes sense.
So they're interdimensional beings, so
Yeah.
they function in different dimensions. So it can be two dimensions off from the one you're in
Mm-hmm.
and relay a message through the dimensions. That's how I see it.
Wow. It's pretty interesting. All right. Well,
So,
I guess we will wrap it up for the evening. I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to having you on again. So let me know if you'd like to
I'm
come on again.
Deb, delighted to be here with you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really enjoyed all of your stories and your adventures up in the mountains and all of that. That's pretty awesome stuff. All right. Well, thanks again, Gord. Have a great evening.
You're very welcome. Have a great evening yourself, Deb. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye.